This is a story about a man who should have died. Not once, not twice, but over and over again. And yet, every time death came for him, he slipped away. His name was Louis Zamperini, and his life is one of the most extraordinary survival stories in human history. My name's Matt. Welcome to Battlefield Legends, a place where forgotten stories of war come back to life. It's 1943, the middle of the Pacific Ocean. A man is lying in a small yellow raft, drifting under a blistering sun. His lips are split. His skin is cracked. His body, nothing but bones and burns. He can barely lift his head. For weeks, he has fought starvation. For weeks, he has fought thirst. And now, circling below him in the water, are sharks. This man has no food, no water, no way home. Most people would have given up long ago. But for Louis Zamperini, this isn't even the worst thing he'll endure. Louis was born in 1917 in California to Italian immigrants. As a boy, he was small, frail, different. Other kids picked on him, beat him up, but Louis didn't just take it, he fought back. Soon, fighting became stealing. Stealing became running from the police. By the time he was a teenager, he was a wild kid on the verge of losing himself completely. And then, something changed. His brother noticed something. When Louis ran from trouble, nobody could catch him. He wasn't just fast, he was different. His brother pushed him to try running as a sport. Louis didn't want to at first, but the moment he felt the track under his feet and the wind on his face, something clicked. Running became his escape, and then it became his purpose. By the late 1930s, Louis Zamperini was one of the fastest young men in America. He made it all the way to the Berlin Olympics in 1936. There, in front of Adolf Hitler, Louis ran the race of his life. He didn't win a medal, but his final lap was so fast that the crowd gave him a standing ovation. For a boy who once thought he'd never amount to anything, it was proof that he could do something extraordinary. But the world was about to change. In 1939, World War II exploded across Europe. By 1941, after Pearl Harbor, the United States was in the fight. Louis traded his running shoes for a bomber jacket. He became a bombardier on a B-24 Liberator. Now these planes were called the Flying Coffins. They were massive, heavy, full of fuel. They broke down constantly. But Louis flew anyway. Again and again, he climbed into those bombers and set off across the Pacific, where Japanese forces controlled hundreds of islands. And then came the mission that would change his life forever. It was May the 27th, 1943. Louis and his crew were sent on a search and rescue mission over the ocean. The plane was already a wreck. It had been cannibalized for parts. It should never have been in the air. But orders were orders. The B-24 climbed into the sky, 11 men aboard. Hours into the flight, disaster. The engine sputtered, failed. The plane shuddered violently, and then it dropped. The bomber slammed into the Pacific Ocean at over 200 miles an hour. The impact was so violent, men were torn apart instantly. Out of 11 crewmen, only 3 survived. Louis, his pilot Phil, and a tail gunner called Mac. They crawled onto a tiny raft, barely big enough to sit in. They were alive, but they had almost nothing. No real food, no water, just a few chocolate bars. And surrounding them, thousands of miles of ocean. First days they clung to hope. They rationed the chocolate, prayed for rain, and kept scanning the skies for planes. Then, one night, Mac broke. He panicked, and he ate all of the chocolate. When Louis and Phil woke up, the food was gone. They were furious, but there was nothing they could do. Now it was them against the Pacific. Days turned into weeks. The sun roasted them until their skin peeled in strips. Saltwater ate away at their flesh. Their lips cracked until they bled. At night, the cold was unbearable, and the sharks never left. Sometimes dozens of them circled the raft, their fins slicing through the water. Sometimes they rammed the sides. Other times, they launched themselves halfway onto the rafts, snapping their jaws, inches from the men's legs. Louis and the others fought them off with oars, with fists, with anything they could grab. But the sharks weren't their only enemy. They were starving. They caught fish with their bare hands. They snatched seabirds out of the sky and ate them raw. They cut open sharks and ate the livers. They drank rainwater when they could. Most days, they drank nothing. After weeks at sea, Louis heard it, a low drone of an engine. He looked up and saw a plane. Rescue, finally! Louis grabbed a small mirror and flashed signals. The plane banked. It was coming closer. And then, the gunfire started. The aircraft wasn't American. It was Japanese. Machine guns tore the water apart. Bullets ripped through the raft. Louis and Phil threw themselves into the sea, clinging to the ropes as sharks swam just below. For minutes, they dangled between death above and death below. But somehow, not a single bullet hit them. When the plane finally left, Louis scrambled back aboard. The raft was shredded with holes. Somehow they managed to patch them, and still they drifted. By the third week, Mac couldn't hold on. He was delirious, starved, sunburned beyond recognition. He closed his eyes and never opened them again. Louis and Phil said a prayer, then they pushed his body into the water. Now it was just the two of them. Days blurred into weeks, 30 days, 40 days. By then, Louis and Phil were no longer men. They were skeletons with sunburns, but they refused to give up. Then finally, land. Palm trees, sand, the Marshall Islands. After 47 days at sea, they had made it. But salvation came with a price, because waiting for them on shore were Japanese soldiers. Louis and Phil were dragged from the raft and beaten. They were thrown into prison camps, and there a new nightmare began. They were starved, beaten, humiliated, and then came him. A Japanese guard named Mutsuhiro Watanabe. Prisoners called him the Bird. The Bird fixated on Louis. He saw him as a spirit he wanted to crush. So he tortured him. He made Louis stand for hours under a scorching sun. He beat him with his fists, with a belt buckle, until Louis passed out. Every day the Bird sought him out. Every day he tried to break him. And every day Louis refused. He wouldn't bow. He wouldn't quit. Even as his body wasted away, his spirit stayed alive. By 1945, Louis was a shadow of himself, barely alive. But finally, the war ended. The camps were liberated. The Bird vanished, fleeing into hiding. And Louis Zamperini, against all odds, survived. When he returned home, he was a celebrated hero, but he struggled. Nightmares haunted him. Memories of the Bird consumed him. He drank to forget. He lashed out in anger. and yet somehow he found a way through. Years later, he confronted his past. He travelled back to Japan, and he forgave the men who tortured him. The bird refused to meet him, but Louis forgave him anyway. Louis Zamperini lived to be 97 years old. He was many things: a troublemaker, a runner, an Olympian, a soldier, a prisoner, but above all, he was unbroken. Most people can't imagine surviving one of these ordeals. Louis Zamperini survived them all. Proof that sometimes the human spirit really cannot be defeated. So that's the story of Louis Zamperini, a man who should have died a dozen times over, but never did. He endured the ocean, he endured starvation, he endured torture, and in the end, he endured himself. Now here's my question for you. If you were in Louis' position, starving at sea, sharks circling, days turning into weeks with no rescue in sight, what do you think would have broken you first? The hunger? The thirst? The sharks? Or the hopelessness? Let me know what you think in the comments. If you enjoyed that, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It means a lot, and watch this story next. It's one you'll never forget.